Brian and Kenzie in the morning. And Chicago's alternative all day.
Q101.
Kenzie's Krimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a North Side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people have done to me.
See, says Heaven's Gate awaiting.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101 with another edition of Kenzie's Krimes. A deep dive into a local murder, drama, mystery crime that Kenzie has spent a lot of time on to deliver it to you.
So I always title my Kenzie's Krimes. This one for me is titled Poisoned Lovers. I've never got to do this before, and I'm kind of excited about it.
Can't wait.
On July 16th, 1924, Wilford Sweeten, who worked at Nason Mines, got a slight injury to his arm when some mine timbers collapsed.
An injury that just doesn't happen today.
Not a comment. I'm sure people be mining.
If there's a miner listening, check in.
Yeah, and he's probably like, my arm still hurts. What are you talking about? Okay.
Happened every damn day.
Oh. The following day, well off work, he accompanied his wife, Elsie, on a trip to Benton, Illinois to do some errands. While in Benton, they went to a drugstore where they each had a Coca-Cola and a bowl of ice cream. This is so 1924, am I right?
No, it's actually last night for me.
Like at Walgreens?
I love getting the
What store did you get a bowl of ice cream at and Coca-Cola?
Skip the drugstore part, but ice cream with a Coke, forget about it.
Well, yeah, that's not what I was addressing. People still have both of those products. They also purchased a sack of candy and some peanuts. Again, so 1924.
But do you think the candy was any good? It was probably like sucky 1920s candy.
Some of the candy was good.
Well, I don't want like butterscotch.
I do like, I like an old school caramel, though. You want to go old school with like the recipe, stovetop.
Which is like a block of caramel?
You don't have caramels?
No, not really.
You don't have like caramel candy ever?
No. Do you just have that as a snack?
Yeah, I love caramels. What are you talking about?
Nasty.
It's caramel.
Caramels are an available candy in today's world.
I don't
sea
know.
salt caramel like melt in your mouth?
Only caramel I want is when it's sauced on ice cream to come full circle.
Good
Wow.
Lord.
See, I picture when you said candy from the 1920s, an apple on a stick.
It wasn't an apple. They got some peanuts and some candy.
Yeah.
So on the way home, Wilford started to get sick to his stomach. And after they got home, Elsie said she wasn't feeling well either, but Wilford had to go get his arm checked, so he drove by himself after that to go get that arm looked at. Okay. Later that day, Elsie went to the store and returned home to find her husband in bed very sick. She called Dr. A.I. Foster, and when Wilford didn't get any better, she called another doctor named Dr. Harper. Hey, like to your girl. He was a mine doctor, so obviously this was a very common injury. I don't have time for your breakdown. I don't.
I got about 15 minutes on mine doctors.
Oh, God.
We can't dive into it. You just have to deal with the details, okay?
Got it.
After being told that they had both eaten like the ice cream, the chocolate candy, the doctors agreed that Wilford was probably suffering from ptomaine poisoning, which is kind of a fancy / old school word for basically food poisoning, is what they decided.
Got
Okay.
it.
When Wilford continued to vomit and suffer great pain, Elsie called Dr. John Clinton. So she's calling all these doctors. This one was the family doctor, and he gave him morphine shots for the pain. A week later, Wilford was still not improving, and Dr. Sam Thompson was called in. He, too, believed it was that ptomaine, like food poisoning. By Sunday, July 27th, 10 days after the trip to Benton, Wilford was in critical condition. Frantically, Elise called more doctors, Clinton, Harper, Thompson, Hamilton. She called the gang, okay?
Jeez.
I know. As well as Reverend Lawrence Height. He also attended to offer prayers and words of comfort. But unfortunately, all of it was unsuccessful on Monday morning at 3:15 when Wilford died at age 41, leaving Elsie a widow to 3 small children.
Oh, that's terrible.
The 4 attending physicians performed an autopsy and noticed that Wilford had an enlarged liver, so that he thought that he probably died because of cirrhosis, which is basically like a liver enlarging and all that.
Big drinker disease. If you drink a lot, you get cirrhosis of the liver.
That is very true. Now, following
Don't tell me how I know that.
Okay. Following a memorial service at Methodist Church conducted by Reverend Height, Wilford was buried at Kirk Cemetery the following afternoon. Reverend Height preached a great funeral service proclaiming that Wilford had died a saved man, a Christian. He converted him on his deathbed and gave his soul to God. He concluded the service by saying he felt unworthy to preach at this funeral for such a great man. Gossip had been going around for some time that Elsie and the Reverend were kind of hooking up.
What?
Neighbors noted on the morning of the funeral that Reverend Height was sitting with Elsie on her porch swing, comforting her by rubbing her face, her arms, and her breasts.
Get away with the face and the arms. The breast is a tough one.
And it's tough. And maybe he's doing the old, you got a little something on your shirt. Boop.
Let me readjust your bra. You don't look good for a funeral right now.
So I am going to pause right there because when I tell you the rabbit hole that this falls down is absolute insanity.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're pausing here because I need a pause.
I know.
After hearing the touching of the breasts.
No kidding.
I know. Sorry. Cliffhanger.
It's Brian and Kenzie on Q101. The conclusion in 3 minutes.
The Brian and Kenzie Show.
On Q101.
Brian and Kenzie on Q101 with the conclusion of Kenzie's Crimes. About a local murder, of course. And this one even set us up pretty good right where you left off, actually. I like where we left off.
Okay, so just a quick recap if you're just joining us. In 1924, a woman, Elsie, was married to a man named Wilford. They were out running errands. He had some candy, and they thought that he suffered from severe food poisoning, so much so that 10 days later he passed away. The reverend, the local town reverend, this is a very small town, performed the funeral service saying he was this amazing man. However, he was seen comforting the wife by rubbing her face, arms, and breasts. All right, we're caught up. Ready?
Hey, Rev, get a room.
Hey, Rev. So after Wilford's death, Elsie clerked in a store. She took care of the 3 boys, which, she was left widowed to take care of, and still found time for her church work. In August, she stayed at Bonnie Camp meeting for a few days. Reverend Height and his wife, Anna, were there too. Reverend Height, who had served at several churches in southern Illinois, was much in demand as a speaker, but despite his religious fervor, people in Ina continue to wonder about his relationship with Elsie, the beautiful 32-year-old, now widowed woman. On Saturday, September 6th, after Reverend Height and his wife returned from a camp meeting in El Dorado, he went to the store and purchased some minced ham to make sandwiches for dinner. Again, this is 1924. I don't want to hear about it, Brian. So he decided he wasn't very hungry. Now, before anyone judges me for saying this next sentence, I want to say this is a direct quote from an actual old newspaper. He wasn't very hungry, but his wife, who weighed about 200 pounds, had a generous portion.
Kenzie, how can you say that?
How dare you?
That is a direct quote, and I thought it was important.
I think you wrote the article in 1929.
I did not write this article, but boy, did they write it, which I found interesting. So follow along with me. After having the generous portion of minced ham for dinner, she began complaining about indigestion. By Sunday, she was vomiting and having severe stomach pain.
Oh, boy.
Right?
I know where this is going.
Oh, boy. When she was no better by Monday, Height sent her to Dr. John Clinton, who treated Wilford Sweeten. By Tuesday, Anna was paralyzed from the neck down, and by Thursday, she was vomiting blood.
Oof.
Other doctors were called in for consultation. Both doctors agreed. They thought she was also suffering from the ptomaine poisoning, which, again, fancy old school word for basically food poisoning, to sum that up. On September 12th, 1924, Anna Height, age 44, passed away. She and Reverend Height had been married for 26 years and had 3 children. She was taken to Metropolis, Illinois, her hometown, for burial. Height returned to Ina after the burial of his wife to find that his wife's death had created, in quotes, quite a stir. The Jefferson County coroner had ordered an investigation which would include the analysis of the contents of Mrs. Height's stomach. When the report came back, Reverend Height was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife.
Wow.
Anna. Height was taken into custody and his things were searched, where they found a box of arsenic. At the Mount Vernon jail, Height told newsmen that he didn't know what all the fuss was about. He had the arsenic to kill rats.
Clearly.
They decided to examine Wilford's dead body as well and found that he had died from arsenic poisoning.
Ooh.
So the husband of Elsie that they thought he was into also died from arsenic. Reverend Height admitted responsibility for both murders once this came out, explaining he only did it to put both of them out of their misery and had nothing to do with the romance. They were both in insane misery and he didn't want them to feel that way anymore.
Misery because their spouses were cheating on them?
Right, no kidding. After Height's confession, the state's attorney said that maybe he should just have life in prison instead of the death penalty due to the fact that he was trying to put people out of misery.
Very kind man.
However, another reverend at his church urged him to make a full confession because of his spiritual benefit.
Sure.
Now, this had an effect on Haidt because he shortly after confessed his sins and this time implicated Elsie in the murder of her husband. Elsie was arrested the next day, but adamantly refused to admit any part of the quote-unquote love pact. And I quote, said, "I can't explain why Haidt named me as a murderer of my husband. He must be a coward and anxious to share guilt with whoever he can." So she was trying to say he wanted it out, was just trying to include somebody else. And she then said his statement was a terrible lie. The officers decided to put them in the same jail cell together in hopes to eavesdrop and get more information.
Love it.
Gotta love 1924,
Yeah.
okay? They heard them discussing the murders in depth, kissing, and Elsie wanting Rev to take all the blame while she promised to watch his kids. So, Elsie finally confessed to falling in love with the Reverend and said that basically she was in an unloving marriage and she did poison her husband. And this is the quote: "On the way home from the drugstore, I gave him some chocolate candy in which I had mixed in some of the poison Haidt had given me. Wilford became very ill, but later he seemed to get better. So on Tuesday, I gave him more poison and oatmeal. He seemed to grow a little better again after another doctor visit. So on Friday, July 25th, I gave him the final dose of poison in his tomato soup. And then he died on July 28th.
I mean, he had some nice meals. He had a few nice meals each time with arsenic in him.
That's true. He ate well.
She hid it in soup, which is supposed to make you feel better.
I know.
That's so mean.
Very mean.
I'd hate getting poisoned.
It would be tough, huh? Not a good time. Well, Elsie confessed fully, so did the Rev, claiming he fell in love with her the minute he saw her walking down the aisle at church. Now, being a small town, most of the community was either a juror or in the audience because they were so drawn to the story, right? It was quite a spectacle. People even packed lunches so they didn't have to miss any part of the court date.
Smart.
And one person even fainted during the hearings because of what was going on. On January 3rd, Reverend Haidt was sentenced to life imprisonment, and Elsie received 35 years. However, Elsie started to proclaim she was not guilty. She said that she was basically kind of manipulated. Like, this man knew I was in an unloving marriage. He took advantage of me and showed me love that I had never had before. It was his idea. She really started saying this was all him. I'm not guilty. I was just an innocent woman who needed a man. And she said that her trial should have been separate from Reverend Haidt because they were tried together.
I think I've dated Elsie before.
Okay.
I've dated that girl, someone
I see, not
like
Elsie.
her.
I
Yes.
see. And she eventually did receive a separate trial, and she was found not guilty.
What?
She was found completely not guilty. She got to walk free. And she married 2 more times after that, after moving to Chicago.
Well, didn't they overhear her talking about the murders with the Rev?
Yes, but she was saying that it was put on her. Do you know what I'm saying? So she was like, he convinced me. During this trial, she started to hate him. Like, you should hang him. He's a manipulator. She started to hate him and say it was all him. And she put this on her. And she was, again, innocent woman in distress.
Again,
okay?
I've dated this girl before.
Okay.
Yeah, again. Good Lord.
Well,
I'm having PTSD over this.
Okay. Haidt stayed in prison. He was paroled in 1952, where he returned to Mount Vernon and died 7 years later. Having confessed to the crimes, he said his conscience was clear. This is his direct quote: "I'm just a human being after all. But since my confession, I am sanctified and in harmony with God once more, and I am happy."
He murdered 2 people.
Yeah, it is true.
His wife.
But he feels better about it.
Yeah, at least he admitted it.
He admitted it. And he's at peace. And now he's like super at peace because he died.
Yeah.
That's part of his journey, Brian.
Yeah.
Don't be so judgy.
Oh, sure. It all started with consoling a breast. That's what it started, this whole thing.
Damn breasts.
Kenzie's Crimes.
Milwaukee police found body parts in a north side apartment.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
This is evil, what those people have done to me.
See, it says Heaven's Gate awaiting.
I'm not guilty.
Q101.